I did tell you that I wasn't going to show you the installation of the channels on the starboard side, but I'm having some second thoughts. If we go back to the model, I'll just turn it on the side a little bit to get a little perspective. This light gray is really starting to bother me. It's too strong, and if you go back on the models, they were either left natural or they were painted a dark color. Why? Because they probably would end up holding a lot of dirt and stuff and salt. So I've decided I'm going to paint them a much darker gray. And so it's easy to do on this side, for the simple reason I haven't installed them as yet. So you know I have everything in different boxes. So this is my painting box, and I'll just take out the things that I need. Get the paintbrush and start working. And this is called Payne's Gray. And actually think it's, well, we'll do one shot at it. It's not a bad color all on its own. So it will require no mixing. Now, in the case of the port side, it's become a little problematic because now we have to go in here and make sure that we don't screw up this. So there are two things. One is I use a razor blade, which will get me right down in the cracks and allow me to get some paint in here and so you put a little bit of pressure on it, make sure you've got it right down. And you can see already what a huge difference it's making to the look of the piece. So again, just need to take your time, make sure you get it right. So you need to constantly clean the razor blade, otherwise when you're using it to protect or give a straight line, it'll actually smudge on the paint. And then again, because it's watercolor, if you do make an error, it's very easy to come back and clean it. Or you can just take the brush, put some water on it and wipe it off. So we'll do the same thing on the other side, and we'll see how it goes. I had to come back with some of the Prussian blue and go down inside because these didn't fit as flush as I thought they should have fit. So there were some glue lines there. So again, just going back down with a very fine brush, and then I'll have to just come back with the dark gray and just re-establish and touch back up so there's no Prussian blue coming out on the piece. Again, one of the benefits of using PVA is that it's easy to apply and it's easy to clean up. Not sure what the hobby would do without PVA, but the most important thing you need to do when applying PVA, particularly in a state like this, is to make sure you get a clean wood-on-wood join. It's simply not going to adhere properly to paint, So you need to take time to get back and clean those lines off so that wood on wood join is perfect. Now we're going to be touching up some of the yellow, and so we have to do a little blend there. And these are little pieces that got damaged. In fact, I've just come back from a presentation put on by the Nautical Research Guild, where Kurt Van Dam went through airbrushing and again all the basics, and we were allowed to ask questions. It was really a fantastic session. But I always have trouble trying to airbrush tiny little parts, the trouble of having to set up, perhaps even mix some paint just to do a tiny little part, and then the cleanup afterwards. And it was interesting that Kurt says he does almost everything with an airbrush, and I'm the exact reverse. I do all the small things with a paintbrush, and I'll do, if I was going to paint the bottom of the boat, I'd certainly use an airbrush. Or if I had lots of pieces to paint all one color, I would certainly use the airbrush. So I'm going to start to maybe do a little more practicing and see if I can't become a little more efficient at using the airbrush. And the reason for that is that with acrylic paints, which is what I've been using for the longest while, it's self-leveling. So when you go to do something like these pieces here, I think it'd be very hard to notice the difference between acrylic that has been brushed on, and you put 2 or 3 coats on, so they're not thick, heavy coats, and an airbrush painted surface. But having said that, I think it's worth going to sharpen up my knocks with the airbrushing. You will remember that I broke the 2 starboard inner and middle counter timbers. So now we're going to replace them. We had made them over, and I just decided at the time not to stick them in. Might break them again. So I'd made this little protection that fitted over the top of this. And now that we've finished both sides, we need to clean up the back. So we've made a little template. It's just a little piece of wood that has all the angles correct. And so it fits right nice and tight inside there. And so we're going to set the next one. And all we need to do is really reverse it and make sure it's nice and flush. And we can stick that one in. When that is in, we'll stick the second one. I hope I'm not confusing you, but if you make a spacer on the left-hand side, you will get an exact copy of that spacer by flipping it around. So the angles will be correct and the spacing will be correct. And that means the left and right lights will be identical. So just take your time. Now we're putting the upper counter planks. Again, a relatively easy task. These were, I believe, 8 and 9 inches. And what's important is that the join between the 2 planks as clean and nice as possible, because you're going to sand this to get that curve look. And remember, this is where you're going to put the name of the vessel. So it's something you need to be careful. I think I only remade this 4 times before I got a fit that I was happy with. And at the end of the day, it came out pretty good. Again, clamping the inner side of that plank becomes the most important thing you're going to do. This morning, we're going to work on the lights or the windows at the back of the ship. And there are many ways to approach this. I've decided, because I've done it quite a few times, to use plexiglass and to cut out pieces of plexi and fit them in the openings, and then put a groove using my mill to hold the wooden mullions, and then to stick the wooden mullions using PVA glue. Why? Again, because PVA glue is very easy to clean up, and I can keep the plexi free of glue. There are some people who have made up the frames independently and use liquid solvents, very clear epoxies that actually form a liquid, clear liquid at the back of it. I've tried that and haven't had really great success. I find there's a lot of curvature to the epoxy when it forms, whereas with the PVC plastic, it's nice and clean and clear, and if I make a mistake, it's very easy and inexpensive to replace. But let's just quickly go through the stern of the boat so that we get a better understanding of the lights. There's a mullion, which is that yellow cover that fits over the joint between the counter timber and the window frame, so it'll cover up any slight mistake you might make when making up the lights. The blue at the bottom is a sill, so again it tells you it's recessed in. And at the bottom there's a molding that goes right across that again will tighten up on any slight imperfection that you may have with the base. And at the top, the taffel, I think it's called, comes down, and again you'll have the same thing that should take care of any slight imperfection that you have when fitting the top of the window. In making up the frame, there are two dimensions you need. The outer frames are 4 inches wide, and the mullions in the center of the window are 1.5 inches wide. And when I made them up, that's really what they look like. There are two approaches to making the windows, and I'll go through each one of them. Here's the first. So the process is really very simple. I would get my measurements, do an approximate fit, and then I go on my desk sander and very slowly start the process of fitting the piece. Again, using measurements that so that I get a nice tight fit. In fact, if you look here, I've already done 3, and the fit is really pretty good. And it's a nice big piece to work with. And then of course it all comes with a plastic covering, which you can decide when you're going to take it off. Certainly you'd have to take it off when you go on the mill. And there's a piece on the back as well, so that's why it looks a little foggy. But that will give you a really nice, clean glass look. Again, I'll rough cut it on the Proxxon bandsaw, and then I go back and forward with the Jim Barnes desktop sander. Just taking your time, a little bit at a time. You can move the angle on the machine to suit the angle you want to cut. And it took me only about 10 minutes to perfectly fit this last window. Here we have all 5 windows cut, and I'm going to redo the center one because I find there's a bit of too much of a space at the top, but all the other 4 are perfect. And then we go on the mill and we line up the centers of each of these to make the cuts for the mullions. Now, I don't have a mill that's going to take me down to 1.5 inches. I only have a 3/64 mill, and so that's going to give me a mullion in the center of the window that's 2 inches. I could order another mill, but that's going to be it's going to be a month by the time it gets here. So I'm going to make the center frames or mullions in the center of the light slightly larger than is stated in the book. We have this spacer which we put at the bottom of the vise, and then we put the plastic piece inside and then just tighten this up, and that holds the piece inside and allows us to cut a groove in the plastic. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to start off with the center window, And what I've done is measured both sides and set up the mullion directions, marked it on the piece. I've set the height of the mill bit that I'm going to use to cut the piece, and I will line up the center on this side with the center on that side. So we just tighten that off so it doesn't move, and reset the depth. Now we're going to cut the sides. So in this method, what we're doing is the plastic piece is the exact dimensions to fit between the counter timbers, and we're going to place the 4-inch frame. We're going to stick it onto the plastic, and then of course sand it down so everything gets to the correct height. And that's it. So now we just fit the mullions in place, and remember to leave the protective paper at the back so we don't scratch the back. Also, to take the plastic off, I use a piece of wood to clean it up. So again, trying not to scratch the plastic. We've cut the mullion to fit, and we're going to put the tiniest amount of glue. We don't want the glue to spill onto the window pane, although you can clean it. With some water. So you see I've already screwed that one up. And a tiny little amount on the piece of wood. Again, you just want to make sure that you've got a good mating surface. And leave that to dry. You might want to just make sure the piece is square, which it is. And here's one I made up. This was my experimental one. In the case of the outside framing, I actually put it the entire thickness of the plastic. In this case, we're making all the moldings the same size. Now we've put the second set of mullions in, and we'll let that dry, and then finally we'll frame the outside. The second method calls for us to cut out the exact frame. So we'll just do a little trial fit here. So that fits inside there perfectly. And then we're going to remove from the edge of the template the 4 inches all around the outside. So I've taken the mullion piece and I'm putting it on the template. It's going to be a bit of a pain to see. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that's the piece of glass that we're going to, well, in this case, plexiglass. That's the piece of glass we're going to end up cutting, and then we're going to mount the frame on the outside. So all I do is I stick this onto a piece of plastic, and I'm sticking it onto this PVC has a plastic protection film on it. So I'm going to stick it on, and so when I come to cut it or reduce it on the Jim Barnes sander, I can see what I'm reducing down to. We've reached that magic 20 minutes, so I'm going to cut it off here and pick it up again next week when we complete the lights in the stern of the HMS Thorn. So we'll see you then.